Greetings from New York City and welcome to the 2022 Jubilee of the Springer Nature Black Employee Network. My name is Marilyn McDonald Hendricks and I serve as the network champion and sponsor of the Springer Nature Black Employee Network, also known as SN-BEN. On August 4th, 2020, SN-BEN was established during the global pandemic of COVID-19. When racial inequality was being discussed with greater scrutiny within the company and in wider society. During the month of abolition of African slavery in Great Britain, the global network was launched with one chapter each in the United States and England to connect both sides of the Atlantic, the waters of the Middle Passage. From inception, SN-BEN purposely aligned its mission, bylaws, and programs with Springer Nature's mission, governing documents, and guiding strategies ranging from commercial to DEI. The collective charge of SN-BEN's programs is to amplify, fortify, and sustain Springer Nature's pipeline of Black talent ranging from employees to authors, editorial board members, and editors-in-chief. Depending on your point of origin, the word Jubilee may have a unique connotation. For instance, in the UK, this year the Queen's Platinum Jubilee was celebrated, marking 70 years on the throne, a first for any British monarch. Today's event is inspired by June 19, 1865, the day that enslaved people of African descent in Galveston, Texas, United States, received the delayed news of emancipation that went into effect January 1st, 1863. For many African Americans, Jubilee and Juneteenth are interchanged or said together. Jubilee is a time of celebration, reflection, and forward thinking. Thank you for joining us today to celebrate, reflect on, and continue to the African diaspora's successful navigation of the global STEM waters. Now I will acknowledge key contributors and today's sponsor. Growing SN-BEN is a team effort, including coordination between the US to even Australia. I continue to be amazed by SN-BEN's continued global committee, who delivers value to Springer Nature's internal and external stakeholders. These strides we have made included support from allies and sponsors. Many thanks to Scientific American for sponsoring today's event. Founded in 1845, Scientific American is the oldest continually published magazine in the United States and covers the advances in research and discovery that are changing our understanding of the world and shaping our lives. In closing, SN-BEN acknowledges the invaluable continuing support of our colleagues in diversity, equity, and inclusion. We will now hear from our management board member responsible for DEI, Rachel Jacobs.
Hello, everybody, and thank you, Mimi. I'm Rachel Jacobs. I'm the Group General Counsel and the Management Board Member at Springer Nature. I'm also Springer Nature's Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Champion, which gives me the great privilege of working with colleagues across the organisation on our DEI strategy to improve diversity, ensure people are treated fairly, and to build a more inclusive company culture. As part of this role, I've had the great pleasure of working closely with the Springer Nature Black Employee Network, or SN-BEN, and I'd like to take a moment today to celebrate their achievements. SN-BEN is actually our 7th employee network, and since its launch 2 years ago, the network has achieved a great many things in a relatively short time period, furthering the conversation on racial equity within Springer Nature and beyond. Internally, SN-BEN looks to support and advocate for Black employees, raising awareness of relevant topics and creating a community for its members globally. Externally, SN-BEN is committed to supporting the wider Black community and the network has been a driving force at Springer Nature as we push for progress in our industry and within the communities that we serve. As well as their wide range of network projects, SNBN also plays an absolutely pivotal role in our company-wide DEI initiatives. SNBN organisers are part of DEI working groups across our business, including those looking at issues such as greater representation in our content and in our workforce, and those creating guidance and policies for our editorial teams. Network organiser Bernadette Bino is a serving member of our DEI Council, one of 2 representatives from our employee networks, advocating for network priorities from across our company at a global level. Today's event is just one fantastic example of SNBN's commitment to seeing progress in our industries and their ability to bring together leaders and innovators to focus on diversity in STEM. We are extremely proud of the work that Springer Nature's Black Employee Network has achieved since launching in 2020. And I'd like to now share a short video covering just a sample of some of their excellent work that has been delivered in 2021. Thank you.
Greetings from New York City. My name is Marilyn McDonald Hendricks, sponsor of the Springer Nature Black Employee Network, created on August 4, 2020 in New York City and London, England. In 2021, SNBN's activities aligned with Springer Nature's strategies related to DEI and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. I collaborated with senior colleagues to establish the HBCU Working Group, which I currently chair. As a member of Springer Nature's steering group related to the SDGs, I proudly recognize how SNBN's activities also aligned with SDGs 4, 9, and 10.
Hi, I'm Bernadette Bino and I work as an account manager in institutional sales. As a graduate of an HBCU, Clark Atlanta University, I've always found it necessary to help educate those interested in building relationships and understanding the culture of Black institutions. In 2021, we were able to pull off our very first HBCU Masterclass, where myself and others collaborated with strategic partnerships. Sponsored by BCRF, we were able to give 25 Black researchers from 8 schools the opportunity to speak with and learn from some of our editors. In addition to the work done with the DEI survey, it was with great pleasure that I served on the DEI Council as one of the network representatives for SN employees. Working on building external and internal policies proved to not only be a rewarding experience, but a pathway to a more diverse and inclusive Springer Nature.
Hi, I'm Deborah Daly. I'm the Global Co-Chair for SNBN. I'm also the UK lead for the State of the Black Employee workstream, the aims of which include working with the business to improve the representation of Black people within Springer Nature. One way we've done this is to run sessions with Black STEM associations to highlight Springer Nature as an employer and the variety of roles within STEM publishing. Working with HR, so far we've run 2 sessions, one with BB STEM in the UK and one with STEM Noir in the US. This is an activity we plan to continue.
Hi, I'm Felicity Ajman, SNBN Programme Coordinator and UK lead for our Pay It Forward stream. I'd like to highlight a couple of projects we have been involved with. Following on from the publication of a problematic article, a task force was formed by Springer Nature's Editorial Advisory Group to review our publishing processes, and I represented SNBN. I'm pleased to report that SNEAC has proposed a framework, first of its kind for a major publisher. The second project to highlight is the Nature News internship, which launched in September. The news team approached us with a proposal to offer a 3-month internship to a candidate of Black heritage. We worked alongside the team on promotion and onboarding.
Hi, my name is Devin Williams, and I am the U.S. co-lead for the Black Table Talk stream and treasurer of the Springer Nature Black Employee Network. Highlighting Black Table Talks achievements, I want to thank all of our guest speakers who participated in the launch of our speaker series in the year of 2021. Without honest conversations about diversity with Professor Antonia Baines, or finding tangible ways to promote inclusion with Charlotte Owens, or the importance of mentorship with Professor Anthony Hatch, the speaker series would not be what it is today. I want to thank our colleagues and our guest speakers and our partners at Scientific American for making this series possible. I look forward to what our network will accomplish in 2022. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Marilyn and I am the Senior Business Development Manager here at Springer Nature. I am the UK lead for the Black Employees Network, and I also work on the stream of Black Table Talk. I wanted to highlight the achievements that we had for 2021. The Black Employees Black Table Talk Conversations, a speaker series speaking to Black excellence in different areas of STEM, was a phenomenal success. I'd like to say thank you to all of those that participated in the event. For this year, the aims are to supersede the accomplishments that we did then and to really vamp it up and showcase even more Black excellence in different areas of STEM. Thank you so much.
You have to get to the point where you have to be comfortable in your skin. And Norfolk State helped me with that. You have to be comfortable in your skin, and you have to get to the point where you realize you're here for a mission, you're here for a task, and you do what you have to do. And what you do is if you find groups that can support you, you make your own community. You make your own community. I believe when everybody's at the table, we can find solutions quicker and faster. But if you just have one homogeneous population at the table, then you're going to only have one type of perspective, and that one perspective may not be what's needed to help solve a problem quicker. But there's much more in diversity than just how much melanin you have, in your cells. I think representation is so important. I don't know if I would even be here talking to you or even have this opportunity as a professor, as a scientist, as a researcher, if I didn't see folks that look like me doing what I'm doing now. If I didn't see that mentor, that graduate student, the African-American male, if I didn't see him working hard in the laboratory and doing what he's doing, what he was doing at the time, I don't know I could have seen myself do that. So representation is so important. Why is that passion important? That passion is important because STEM is hard. I mean, biology, chemistry, pharmacology, toxicology, whatever, it's hard. And there's going to be some tough days. There's going to be some tough classes and some tough days. You also need a mentor. You need role models and mentors. Those, because you can't do it by yourself. Again, you probably would not be talking to me today if I didn't have any mentors and role models that encourage me, not only during those good times, but those bad times as well. And so having a team of role models, a team of mentors is important. So I think things have changed moment by moment. But I feel like we need to focus on having these sustainable changes. Because these sustainable changes that is not impacted necessarily because one event happens or event doesn't happen. It's just these sustainable changes.
When I think about Merck, how we approach diversity and inclusion, it's fundamental. It's fundamental to our organization. It's one of our basic values and standards. We have to make sure that our employee base mirrors the diversity of our patient base. You want a diverse workforce, but you got to make sure that you're maximizing the diversity in your workforce. Because I do believe that at that intersection of diversity and inclusion and business performance, you do create a competitive advantage for the company.
So I enjoyed my time at NASA so much that I decided to go all the way and get a PhD in the area of structural engineering and mechanics. And that led me to a different state, North Carolina, where I attended North Carolina State University, provide educational, inspirational content for the STEM community. And so it has grown over the years, been able to connect with other individuals to an online platform, STEMmedia.com. I was flat out asked in my PhD program, why am I getting a PhD? Because you all don't get PhDs. More people need to have their eyes open to the actual value proposition of diversity. The actual value that comes from having people from different backgrounds in the room. Because everything starts with a vision. And believe it or not, a lot of young people who haven't seen something need a vision to borrow at first.
The most proud of is my teaching and my relationship to my students. And I benefited from these kinds of mentoring programs over the years enormously. And those efforts are ongoing. When you're dealing with an institutional structure like kind of global science, it is one of its core features is that it has been a racial structure, right? When you look at who occupies the positions around the world, there's a clear racial hierarchy involved, and that's been the case for a while. The same racial structures that exist within the broader society are also replicated within science, right? Science is not immune, to those social forces. So as everyone is contending with racism in the public sphere, and in terms of state action and state power and what corporations do, so too there is a reckoning that needs to take place in science. We want to make sure that there's people at the table making decisions. So who's at the table making decisions, right? Who are the gatekeepers, right?
I have the privilege of being able to deliver care at the bedside for individual patients, trained residents, and medical students, which is important. That's our future. To whom much is given, much is expected. So being able to give back to the community, whether it's volunteering to improve healthcare and healthcare delivery for others, or even just to be able to financially contribute to organizations that help serve. There's certainly room for improvement when it comes to representation overall. I'm optimistic, though, that we're moving in the right direction, but we need to continue to work in tangible ways to make things better. I think that we need to do a better job at creating a supportive and inclusive and equitable work environment that inspires and grows diversity in STEM from an early age, but that we create the path for influential roles in STEM and inspire and encourage people to pursue STEM all the way through.
So my role, it's a bit different. It falls under the SWAB Corporation Governing Procedure for Internal Investigations. The second would be, of course, becoming a mentor, because it's always good to give back. The market is real fertile for people that are looking for a career path in STEM. So it has progressed. It needs to progress more because in STEM there's still disparities in regards to people of color. But as long as we keep pushing and moving the ball forward, there'll be change. There'll be better days. Like at Charles Schwab, they're doing a lot in regards to diversity and inclusion and trying to close the gap on those disparities. I feel that the industry is still unwelcoming, and that we do notice sort of an uptick after the George Floyd incident and that death, and we do notice a renewed spark, around education and racial inequality. I believe that spark and a new interest is happening, and we just have to keep, driving the point home, and try to get this industry changed in regards to STEM, so that there can be more and better opportunities. There definitely needs to be a change in the education system. We need to have better access to STEM programs.
Yeah, so I started a platform called Hip Hop Science, where I use music, entertainment, and comedy as tools to educate on a wide variety of scientific subjects. And it's really just a creative way to get people excited about science, right? I work with a lot of different institutions, K through 12. I work with companies and corporations and organizations about diversity. And I really noticed a lack of involvement with minorities and youth in STEM. And I really wanted to find a way to be able to connect them into those fields. Another amazing thing that I did with the platform this year was I had a chance to go on a zero gravity flight as part of this program with Space for Humanity. They brought me on board because of my Hip Hop Science platform. I released a video talking about the importance of space exploration and representation in the space sciences, right? Because that's another area where you don't traditionally see Black and brown voices. All throughout my schooling at University of Washington, I was one of very few minorities in all my classes, right? And even in high school, right? I went to high school in Vancouver, Washington, not a very diverse community. So I'd always been kind of used to being the one of few, right? And it became more prevalent as I got older, and especially as I got into the workspace and the work field, going into my job as a lead engineer on a project and walking into a room and people not believing that I was the lead scientist on a project or lead engineer on a project, and kind of overlooking me or overlooking my skills or abilities or what I brought to the table because they hadn't seen somebody that looked like me in that position, right? It's really been special being able to highlight that in the work that I do, not only in driving excitement to our K through 12 and college students, but then also working with companies and organizations about how they can not only bring in more diverse workforce, but also to retain that workforce and find ways to be able to lead them and push them into positions of power as well. Last year, there was a lot of momentum being addressed to inequities and racial injustice and focusing on diversity and inclusion, because that was the hot thing, right? But as times have changed and new things have happened with the pandemic and the landscape of the world has changed and new distractions have come to the table, you start to see a slow disconnect again. And I think that's kind of where we're at right now. It's always kind of a cycle, and this is kind of the trend that it's always been on for generations, right? We'll address something and then we'll do some work and some efforts, and then things kind of go back to the norm again. And it's really up to us to really keep putting that in the forefront, right? Keep having those discussions, holding people accountable, finding ways that we make this a regular discussion and not just a trending discussion.
These are the tenets on which our network was established. I'm Courtney Little, Global Chair of the Springer Nature Black Employees Network. In 2022, the Global Committee will continue to deliver initiatives that support our goals of improving Black representation and wage parity at all levels, while continuing to provide a safe space to discuss topics and issues that impact our community. Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Marlene Stewart, Senior Business Development Manager and UK Chapter Lead for our network. Thanks so much for joining us today for the Springer Nature Black Employee Network Jubilee event on the topic of diversity. We are very excited to welcome back some of our speakers from our 2021 speaker series that was a great success. Today, we'll be delving into the topic and getting thoughts and feedback from our amazing panelists. Our first panelist on here today is Dr. Antonia Baines. He is an Associate Professor and Pancreatic Cancer Researcher at the Department of Biological and Biomedical Services at North Carolina Central University. Additionally, Dr. Baines is also an Adjunct Associate Professor at UNC-Chapel Hill. Dr. Charlotte Owens, MD, FACOG, serves as Takeda's Vice President, Head of Center of Health Equity and Patient Affairs. Dr. Owens' mission is to uncover and address health inequities globally. She has worked in the pharmaceutical industry for more than 12 years and has practiced obstetrics and women's health for more than 20 years. We also have Dr. Nehemiah Mabry, PE and engineer, educator, entrepreneur based in North Carolina. His technical experiences include 15 plus years as a NASA researcher, bridge design engineer, and adjunct professor. Dr. Mabry is founder and CEO of STEM Media Incorporated, a digital media company that provides educational entertainment content for the STEM community. Sabrina Fourrier is a drug development scientist who has been working in the pharmaceutical industry for more than 5 years. Sabrina is the Black British in STEM Corporate Partnerships Director, BBSTEM for short. By highlighting the importance of diversity and representation, she works towards bridging the gap between talent and opportunities. And lastly, but no means least, we have our very own moderator, Marilyn Hendricks, Mimi. Marilyn is the sponsor and co-founder of the Black Employers Network, chair of our HBCU working group, and executive licensing manager. Again, thanks so much for tuning in today and being part of our conversation.
Greetings, good day, everyone. So today we're covering a lot of meaty questions. And to our audience, I encourage you to enter your questions and any kind of thoughts that you would like to share as they surface, and we will do our best to weave them into the current discussion and the question and answer section. So let's get started. It is such a privilege to speak with you today, panelists. For many, including myself, this will be the first comparative discussion on navigating the global STEM waters with representation from both sides of the Atlantic, from the UK as well as from the US. On behalf of the audience, I look forward to hearing your insights to illustrate commonalities as well as distinctive differences. So let's plunge right in and talk about the state of Black people in STEM, ranging from academia to the workplace. We will address this topic in two parts, starting first with students and then the workplace. I'd like to start in the UK. So Sabrina, could you first start sharing your thoughts?
Well, thank you for having me go first. Yeah, I think, the reason behind BU-STEM existing is, acknowledging that there's a, gap in the representation of Black individuals in STEM, whether it is in STEM studies, but also later on in the workplace as well. So I think there's many things that we need to be doing in order to help, address this issue, whether it is at a very early stage. To me, there's actions to be done at each stages of, education, whether it is at a very early age where you can focus on representation, making sure that kids can see themselves becoming scientists. I mean, broadly speaking, being part of the STEM environment, and then later on, making sure that you can give them the tools, you can influence school programs to make sure that they have access to the skill set and the knowledge that is required for them to get into STEM studies. And then whilst they're studying, and this is where our core members are, our universities, making sure that they can have access to mentoring, for instance, to help them stay motivated, because it's not easy studying STEM, to stay motivated, to also understand how they will later navigate the workplace once they're done with the studies, and then once they are part of the workplace, making sure that they can have people, they can feel part of a network, because sometimes you can feel quite alone when you're a minority in those places, not really seeing people that look like you, not feeling very encouraged and supported, and making sure that we can create a network of people who are in a similar space that they can share with, whatever struggle they are going through, or even if they are considering changing, careers or field, etc. So to me, these questions need to be addressed on different levels. And at BB-STEM, we're currently focusing on university students here in the UK, but also we're trying to start a bit earlier on A-levels and younger ones as well.
Thank you. So I'd like to cross the pond and ask Dr. Baines, Tony, why do you think there's such a low numbers of students entering post-grad and undergraduate STEM education?
Well, first I want to say hello, everybody. It's good to see all your pretty and handsome faces. I am happy to be here and happy to be able to be a part of this very important conversation. As my colleague Sabrina was talking, I was thinking about this past May and June, I've had two of my former mentees from NC Central behind me. One to graduate from pharmacy school, an African-American female, and one to graduate from medical school, Boston University Medical School. School of Medicine, and very proud of them. I'm proud of all my students, and they are unfortunately the outliers when it comes to students going into STEM from undergrad and staying on that pipeline. Yeah, unfortunately, the outliers. The majority of students who I think come to undergrad, they immediately want to go to medical school. I would say the majority of our biology and chemistry majors at NC Central and at many other universities want to, go to medical school. And again, nothing wrong with that. My ND colleagues on the line, nothing wrong with that at all. But I think, unfortunately, students don't really appreciate what that really means in terms of the long hours studying, in terms of being disciplined, in terms of not saying yes to every party every Friday night, not being able to go to every party. Or if you do, you need to stay up Saturday and Sunday taking care of business. And so I think because students don't really appreciate what it means to be a STEM undergraduate or a STEM scholar, I think that's one reason. Why we don't see a lot of students who go into STEM stay in the STEM. I think another reason is, again, depending on what institutions you attend, they don't see scientists or MDs or STEM professionals that look like them. So happy to see all you here today representing various STEM professionals, but that's not common for every student, depending on what institution they attend. And so I'm happy to say at NC Central, a historically Black college and university in North Carolina, one of the schools in the UNC system, UNC-Chapel Hill system, here we do see that. The students, it's common for a student to walk and see a Black mathematician, a Black physicist, a Black chemist, a Black pharmacologist. But that doesn't happen at many of PWIs, predominantly white institutions, and I think that's needed. I think students need to see that to get that encouragement, because as was said, science is hard, STEM is hard, and you need to see folks that look like you, that have gone through the same paths you've gone through and made it. And so I would say, I don't want to take the whole time, but I would say that one, students not really appreciating and knowing what it really means to be a STEM scholar, what that means, is one issue of why we see very few STEM students of color, staying in that pipeline. And two, the lack of mentorship, the lack of role models. So I would say those are the two big ones. And then, there's always issues of the unsupportive environment. The unsupportive environment that you see as you get further on that pipeline, that environment gets very interesting because of lack of diversity. In terms of because since some people have not had the experience of being around minority students or people of color, for some reason they tend to act as if that's something weird and start getting kind of finicky and weird in that space with those students, and that leads to, unfortunately, a lot of microaggressions and discrimination events that also leads to that discouraging environment. So I would say those three definitely is some of the reasons why we don't see as many STEM students, many students going into STEM, and once they go into STEM, staying in STEM. That's the important thing, not just going into STEM, but staying in STEM.
Understood. I see Nehemiah really wants to say something, and I'd like you to weigh in, because I'm also thinking about the fact that STEM is used very generically, and that it's not just about going into STEM, it's about what areas of STEM, and where some people tend to go more towards what is a lot more tangible, such as the biological and life sciences, versus going into physics and the mathematics, which tends to be more theoretical, even though you need the theory to do the practical. So Nehemiah, please share your comments.
Oh, for sure. I like to say you have to see it before you see it. And, other popular sayings that say you can't be what you can't see. And I like to challenge that too, on a point that is not just seeing it physically, but it's also seeing it mentally. And this applies not only to seeing others that look like you in the field, but to your point of just speaking about tangible and theoretical. There's a need in STEM on multiple levels to be able to see something, to have a vision beyond just physical sight, in order for people to stay with it, right? Because that's what it comes down to, staying with it. being able to see, all right, this is a place that I belong, I have a sense of belonging, my intellect is valued, I'm able to contribute to an ultimate output that unlocks the potential for innovation that the world has yet to see. This is aided by having other people that you can relate to in the workplace. This is aided by making sure that there are anti-racist policies that exist in the workplace. And it's also aided by one's ability to see that even though, you know, I don't necessarily have a way to build, say, these chemical reactions in front of me, or I don't have a way to actually visualize what this code is going to do yet, right? I can still put some sort of figment in my mind that pushes me, or rather pulls me towards it. And so that comes down to really the necessity of being able to aid in helping people see it before they see it. Let's help them see themselves graduating, walking across the stage. I used to get to the point where I got goosebumps so much when I was working on my PhD, whenever I would picture myself walking across the stage, because it was that vivid, right? And the truth of the matter is so many of those who have the potential to literally change the world, so many of our Black youth, so many people who even our peers, right? Not just the youth, people who are thinking about career changes, have the potential, have the ability, have the intellect that can really spark something that the world has yet to see, just don't see it yet themselves. And so it takes an extreme intentionality, such as what we're doing here in the Black Employer Network, right? And those who are not necessarily in the Black community to say, hey, I'm going to at least begin to remove barriers that make it hard for people to see themselves in this future. I'm going to remove these barriers, and then I'm going to intentionally support opportunities that may allow them to see physically individuals that have done it, to see physically individuals who have been able to push through those hard subjects. And then at some point, this is what happens, right? At some point, that vision that was borrowed for such a while, and I saw the clip that I actually still agree with today from my talk, that vision that was borrowed becomes owned, and it has resonance in the minds of those who have the potential so that they can continue to achieve.
Perfect. I'd like to actually weave in the next question with this one, because it was brought up about the pipeline in terms of if you don't see it, because usually you see it because there are professors. If you're the first or the few, it's the professors, or it's someone in your, potentially in your church, or in some kind of community aspect that you feel that connection, or even at work. So Charlotte, could you talk a little bit about where you see the pipeline of the impact of the low numbers flowing into the workplace?
Yeah, you know, first of all, let me just say thanks for being here, and how happy I am to hear all of really enriching conversation today. You know, I'm thinking about this from a couple of different perspectives. So when we look at what everyone has said, it's absolutely true. But I also want to kind of dwell a little bit for some of the institutions that are not really full of minorities that you can envision. And why is that the case? So when you think about the life complexities for those that get into STEM, then I think you can start to think about this. So traditionally, professors get promoted and achieve job security through what's called a tenure track, right? And so you start as an assistant professor before moving to an associate professor, and then finally to a professor. After some period of time, if you're on the tenure track, then you get evaluated for your performance, for your teaching, your service, and your research. And this is where I'm going to go with respect to the research piece. Because we know that for Black professors, this is not necessarily the whole case. In the last decade, we've seen a decline in the number of Black people who make it as professors to full tenure. And this is concerning because the number was already low. It's about 7% or so. And so when you actually try to think about the way for us to increase the number of Black professors in STEM, we first have to think about ways to provide advancement opportunities for those who are already in the field. We've talked a lot about getting in the field, but once people are in the field, what are you doing to promote their success and their continuation in the field? One way of doing this is really by thinking about expanding access to research dollars for minorities. Participation in research is critical if you're on the tenure track, and in many cases will prevent people from getting tenure And studies have already pointed to the racial inequities in grant funding. It's not a secret, it's well known. People talk about it all the time. In fact, research grants are almost twice as likely to be given to white investigators than Black investigators, showing a clear barrier for those that are Black and brown to really reach tenure. So if we're going to continue this normal path for tenure, then we have to do things to enrich the opportunity for everyone to reach tenure. Or we have to start thinking about a prolific career in a non-tenure track. So we tend to choose career paths based on where we see ourselves. We've all said that, right? We have to borrow someone else's dreams and hope sometimes in order to be able to get there. But let me ask you this. Would you encourage someone to go into a field that you're not fulfilled in yourself? So if we do not actually make sure that people who are in the field are fulfilled, how can they really wholeheartedly encourage others to stay there? So additionally, when it comes to representation in my field, for example, research shows that people are actually better cared for when they are cared for by someone who understands them, who looks like them, who can have empathy and even sympathy for them. And we know this, as a physician, that's what happens. And this is because if you are very similar to the person you're caring for, you understand that what it takes to be healthy goes beyond just the treatment. You have to think about the built environment, the transportation, the childcare, the access to pharmacies, access to decent food, etc. And so you also have to create an environment where people can do things to make a difference. So I would say we have to not only support those who are in the field, but we also have to get really creative about how to make sure that we are actually bringing people together to really solve for this. With only 10% of STEM faculty being represented by minorities, there are few opportunities outside of HBCUs for Black students to see themselves as successful in the field or to be taught by professors who understand their struggles. So we have to find a way to reach the students where they're at, especially when they don't show up at a place like my institution, where I'm adjunct faculty, Morehouse School of Medicine, or at NCCU or other places. We somehow have to be omnipresent and not only think about getting students in, but keeping those of us who are in the profession there, healthy and holistic.
Agreed with everyone on all points and really tried to figure so many different ways to pivot with this. I'd like to talk a little bit more about the vision and borrowing people's vision, whether it's a vision of someone who looks like you or not. So we're really talking about allies in addition to our own community. And I think about the fact that many of the doctors, the professionals, engineers, and things like that, who came out of the HBCUs, their parents did not have those experiences. They had no idea what they were sending their children to do. They just knew that education was the way. So I'd like to have some quick comments or thoughts around allyship as to, if you can't find someone who actually looks like you, how do you connect to someone that resonates with you to be able to see the vision, or at least find out where the room is? Like in Hamilton, you want to be in the room when it's happening. Who would like to take that? Go ahead, Tony.
So I'll just start off. First of all, Nehemiah, I look forward to meeting you since you're in North Carolina. But you were saying something about, sometimes you got to do things to get that motivation. I remember when I was at the University of Arizona working on my PhD in pharmacology and toxicology, I imagined how I would look in a cap and gown, with those velvet stripes on your sleeves and that long velvet down the front. I would imagine that. And so what I would do, I know it sounds crazy, but again, you got to do things that will help you get through those tough times and give you that motivation, especially at the end when you're trying to finish up. I would go to the University of Arizona bookstore once a week, because that's where you had to buy your cap and gown. I would go there once a week and just look at those cap and gowns, just imagining myself in them. Arizona was blue and red. And that's what got me through. That's what got me through near the end. You know, every once a week I would go to that bookstore and just look at that cap and gown in that plastic wrapping and imagine wearing it. And as you all know, that happened. That eventually happened. So I just, you know, when you were talking about imagining and motivation, I thought about that. So I just want to just throw that out there. In terms of allies, you know, there's no way I would be who I am and be where I am if there were not allies. Because sometimes that's all you have. That's all you have. And so I remember, I grew up in Virginia, and I remember having this, you know, I was really good in school, especially the science and math. And because of that, people looked out for me. And a lot of my teachers were white. And one thing led to another. I'll just say this quick story. One thing led to another. And my high school biology teacher, who was just amazing. He's probably the reason why I decided to go into teaching and research, because I was just amazed about how he made science so interesting. But his wife was a technician for a plant pathologist. And basically, long story short, because I did so well in his class, he told his wife, who was, again, the technician for a plant pathologist, you know, at Virginia Tech. And the next thing I know, I'm getting asked, hey, do you want to, you know, this summer you want to work for, you know, a plant pathologist as his summer intern? Boom. And that opened the door. So, and because of that, you know, I worked there. He wrote me recommendations for college, And when I got my PhD, I dedicated it, you know, I did a dedication to him and gave him a copy of my dissertation. So I say all that to say allies are important. You can't get to where you are just focusing on just your people. I mean, of course, we want to definitely celebrate our people and whenever we can be around our people. But as we said, I think studies show, if I'm not mistaken, that the majority of minority students go to PWIs. They don't go to HBCUs, they go to PWIs if those statistics are right, you know. And so if that's the case, you know, we got to make sure we help all students where they are. And that's going to mean, in many cases, trying to find allies. So I just, you know, want to, support the notion that we need allies if we're going to increase the diversity in the STEM workforce.
Thank you. Sabrina. Maybe she needed a moment to reflect.
No, sorry. I was muted, so I couldn't unmute myself by myself. Sorry about that. So yes, when you mentioned that reminded me of the story of how at some point I felt like I needed a mentor, and the person I gravitated towards was a white man. That was part of this company I was working at, just because I see it in him, you know, values and skill set and elements that I wanted to have for myself. And I think when you are in those spaces, and particularly when you are a minority, inevitably you're not always going to find people who look like you. You cannot stop at that, you know, like have this as a barrier for yourself and say, well, okay, well, this is not happening. No one looks like me. I can't find a mentor. You also have to go above and understand what is it that you're trying to achieve and who is the best person at that very moment who can help you do that. And if it's someone that looks like you, that's great. If it's not, then you also need to keep an open mind and understand that I can still go after the skill set. I need to have the connection. I need to build a network. And it's not always going to be with people who look like me, but that doesn't mean that this experience is not going to be valuable. And I think that's also something that we try to encourage within DVSTEM with our mentoring program, is that I'd say 53% of our professionals who are mentors are from a Black, British or African background, but others are welcome because it's about the experience, it's about the knowledge, it's about sharing elements that will help you develop yourself, and that doesn't stop at someone who looks like you. And I think sometimes you also have to be quite realistic and, you know, just grounded and understand that it's not always going to go as you want it to go, but then you also have you shouldn't limit yourself to just that, and find people who are willingly able to share their knowledge, and that person really helped me and understood where I was trying to go, and really just helped me, told me about a company where I applied and I got a job. It just really, you need to keep an open mind and see that help will come, but you have to just stay open to like reaching out to people who are somewhere where you want to go, and that might not look like you. Don't limit yourself, basically, is what I'm trying to say. You shouldn't limit yourself. Yeah.
I love that. Given the fact that we have the benefit of both UK and US experience, we are minorities within both of our countries. Given also that we've got a bunch of global citizens on this panel, what are some of the things that are distinctive within your own countries or places that you have traveled? Because the African diaspora is broad. It's not just the US and UK, and part of SN Ben's mission as being an employee network of a global company is really thinking about looking at the talent and efforts that we can at least promote globally. So who would like to speak on that?
I would just say I think that's a great discussion to broach right now, because I think there are things that we can miss that are the same or different just by not having conversation, right? And just being able to even segue from the previous conversation, understanding that there are sometimes things are similar and understood by people that don't look like you, or maybe from a totally different country, right? As us being minorities in different sides of the pond. And then there are things that are different where like I may share more commonality, maybe in a certain domain with a white American than I would perhaps, a Black counterpart. And I think that happens as you have conversation and discussion. But as you pointed out, one thing that is very clear is that we are numerical minorities in our respective places, and the fact that there is a history of systemic oppression and marginalization that we all are combating to overcome. And so that being said, I just want to first speak on the importance of having these conversations and synergizing and being able to try to identify things that are shared and solutions that can also be shared. In America, I'll say this, and Dr. Owens mentioned that earlier about our need to sort of be omnipresent, and so to speak. And that has been enabled in a whole new way with technology, right? Like we have social media, and STEM Media, my company STEM Media, just to bring that up, has been created in effort to create a community that is not limited geographically. Now, what does that mean though? That means that this evening we can hop on Zoom and have a virtual meetup with people from all over the country, and we can begin to sort of share experiences that we're having and things we're looking to accomplish, and then therefore broaden the network and assist in ways that we couldn't assist if it was just in a local library or in a way that it was just on a local campus. In America, obviously we have certain cultural things that we become very proud of. I was at a restaurant, ethnic restaurant yesterday. It was an Indian restaurant actually, and incredible vibe, incredible theme. Everything was great. And they were playing the music, a lot of Indian music over the speakers. But every time I heard someone go into the back, I would hear what the cooks were actually listening to. And what were they listening to? They were listening to hip hop. And I'm like, yo, that's like something that started right here on this soil, African American produced export, right? That is now permeating the globe. And that speaks to me to a cultural impact that we can leverage in this world of STEM as well. And so I get inspired when I think about, man, if hip hop can literally permeate, countries all over the face of the earth, we have an ability, not exclusively, but a unique ability as Black Americans to also sort of package some of that same energy that produced this, right? And to put it as an export on intelligence, on innovation, on science and technology in a way that also inspires individuals across the globe. And I know a little bit about the music in the UK, but I also would love to kind of receive and have some imports right there. But I just wanted to speak on that as it relates to, a Black American, and just some of that uniqueness that we bring to this diversity and STEM conversation.
You know, I'm curious. Go ahead, Charlotte. Oh, you're on mute.
Okay, yeah, I couldn't get off of mute either, so I know what Sabrina just experienced. You know, I love the response that we just heard from Nehemiah, because here's the way I always think about how you have to settle challenging conversations. And settle is probably the wrong word, but how do you advance challenging conversations? I personally believe that you need to shift the conversation more broadly to focus not only on what makes us dissimilar, but what makes us the same. Because when you move from a binary conversation towards one where we can really help each other see the similarities between one another, I find that people have more patience and willingness to have uncomfortable but needed conversations. Because finding the middle ground is how we actually impact change. And it's also important for allies, for all of us, right, to really understand first what the issues are, and to not see each other as adversarial. What they may or may not fully understand is that we are more similar, not because of the phenotypic things that we see, but because of our life experiences. And so how we can really impact change for everyone when we can focus on similarities is really important. And that's why I think that building that cultural competence means bringing everybody to the table with some sort of lasting commitment to empower each other to have a safe environment where we can voice opinions, where we can participate in the development and implementation of positive systemic change and best practices, where we can start to change the way that we see each other. Because what we do understand is when you feel comfortable around someone, then regardless of what they say, it's more well received. It's when you have this innate opposition to someone that they can say the most innocuous thing and you somehow are looking for something wrong. And so I just truly believe that when we really start to appreciate each other, to learn each other, then it allows us to really find that middle ground. And then you're exactly right, Sabrina. Then it doesn't matter if maybe it doesn't matter as much if you can't see someone that looks just like you, because there's something else you have in common that you can begin to share. And so when we get to that point, that's when I believe that we can actually start to have that long-lasting change. And that's one of the things that I find is really relevant, not just for education, but for health. And so the work that we do at the Center for Health Equity and Patient Affairs at Takeda's really try to start understanding where those health inequities lie, and where they tend to lie is through the social determinants of health, which not only may affect people who have been disenfranchised or marginalized as a race or a population, but they really affect everyone who is socially and economically disenfranchised. And when you see that, then you see a universal way that you can actually improve the lives and the health of everyone, because we've seen through the pandemic that we are so interdependent. And so we have to care about each other in ways that we may not have really appreciated before.
Definitely.
And I would dare say that one thing that connects all of us, and I tell students all the time, is, yeah, you love science. I mean, you love science. I mean, no matter biology, chemistry, physics, although, we used to have little fights in the dormitories about, whose major was most important, but we won't go there. But at the end of the day, it's science. I mean, that's what connects us. And so no matter what you look like on the outside, on the inside, you love asking questions and you love trying to find the answers to those questions. Science. I mean, so that's one common link that I think connects all of us, no matter where we are, as it relates to the pond.
And I hear everything that everyone's saying. I still keep kind of going back to, you have the love. How do you get to be part of the conversation? There are lots of organizations in the United States, whether it's the Divine Nine, the historically Black fraternities and sororities, other civic organizations, as well as the HBCUs. There's this infrastructure here in the US. I'm starting to see that same kind of infrastructure, except for the HBCUs starting over in the UK. What is the charge of how we also reach out and connect our community that are in countries where they actually are the minority, but they're still part of the STEM minority? Any thoughts on that? I'll call on someone.
Can you clarify the question just once more?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
The question is about the fact that we've got two different countries here that have a certain type of infrastructure in addressing being a minority in the country in which they live. And how do those organizations, or how can those organizations also reach out or incorporate the members of the African diaspora that are in countries where they are the majority, but they are still part of the overall global STEM minority? And if I'm not getting there, it's thinking about in terms of, when you go to any conference anywhere that's called the International you know, how many Black people do you see? What countries are they from? And even just their findings, what projects are they on? Sabrina.
Oh, I mean, I think it's funny. I don't want to be disrespectful to Americans, but I think sometimes Americans tend to be so US centric and focused and not realize, I mean, for many reasons, and not realize how vast and how actually developed science and STEM is in other areas. I mean, I've been looking at West Africa, I've been traveling there in the past few months. There are like labs, there are projects, there are similar projects to the 100,000 genome that was happening in the UK, happening now in Senegal, for instance, with a Nigerian-based company that is also in DC. There's so many things happening in the space, and I think just as when people approach us and say, how can I find diverse talent? You tell them, well, you have to look for it. It's the same thing. You have to be open to look and understand what else is happening in areas where you're not really familiar with people. You're not really familiar. You go into LinkedIn and you type, I don't know, if you're into genomics Africa, and you find people and you connect with them and you see how you can leverage those connections. But there are things happening. There are people who maybe went to, had their education in either the US, in the UK, that's very common, and went back to their countries and trying to make things happen. You just have to go find them and link with them and understand how we can help each other. I think obviously at the moment BBSTEM is really like focused on the UK, but if we were to ever expand, I think there's talent everywhere. There's talent who are willing to maybe get an education abroad and come back, or professors that might need help in setting new programs, setting new labs, and there's the fundings needed, etc., etc. There's so many things we can add, okay, we can bring to one another, but you first have to do this work on also opening your mind and understand that, yeah, there are people doing the same work as you somewhere else, and they might need something that you can bring to them, but you have to look for them. Sometimes it's not as, if you are well connected within the country, it's easy to only see the people in your region or in the US or in the UK, and never really see the people in, so I don't know, Ghana, Nigeria, Senegal, doing things, because you create that space that is very easy for you to relate. It's easy for you to connect to these people and relate to these people, and you not necessarily feel the need to explore beyond. But once you open the door, you just realize, wow, okay, there are things happening here, and maybe I'm interested and I want to help, and this is how you find them and this is how you connect with them. But there's talent everywhere within, if you can do it here in the UK or in the US, best believe someone else somewhere else is also able and capable of doing it and trying to do it. And sometimes they might not have access to the same grant fundings, infrastructure in terms of lab, etc., to do it, but they are trying. And you sometimes, I see, maybe as someone from a more privileged place, in a sense, you have to go and look for these people and connect with them and see how you can help. So it's a work that we also have to do. You can't just expect the news to pop up on your LinkedIn field if it's not like something you went looking for. Sometimes that's how I see it.
And that was the response I was looking for. And Antonio, please.
Yeah, so I first of all, Sabrina, definitely not offended being an American, because America definitely has its issues, I promise. So a couple things. I think one thing I want to say is, and I think this is where Mimi kind of wants to go a little bit too, I hope, or if not, I'm in trouble. So first thing I'll say is, Black means a lot of things. So I need to say that Black means a lot of things. Again, African Americans, different, Black people from different countries in Africa. I mean, again, it means many different things, and based on where you grew up, you have different perspectives. If you grew up in the U.S., you have one perspective. If you grew up outside the U.S., you have a different perspective. And you're absolutely right, Sabrina, that we can be very Americentric sometimes to our demise, as if the U.S. is the only place in the whole wide world. And I mean no disrespect. I'm happy to be in America, all that, but we still have a lot of room to grow. And so I think it's important to keep that in mind. I think about it as a cancer researcher. A lot of times when you think about cancer, I give these talks. The number of cases of cancer in the U.S., blah blah blah. How many people die, blah blah blah. But a lot of times we don't focus on global cancers, which is a huge problem. Global cancer is just as bad as the U.S. cancers. And so at the end of the day, we have to get out of our bubble, wherever our bubble is. The U.S., UK, wherever, privilege, whatever. We got to get out of these bubbles that we're in, and realize that there's more to what we're trying to do than just in your bubble. Also, I'll say, I think exposure is so important. So if you've never been to another country, then your only view of that country, unfortunately, is from others, or from media, or whatever, and that could be a disaster. And so I think exposure is so important. So I think until researchers and scientists and STEM professionals get out of their bubble, and that bubble could be their university, could be their state, could be their country, and travel to these other places, then we're going to have these constant issues and yes, we're minorities, but minorities have a lot of power and influence when we come together. But we got to come together, and we got to come together. We can't come together if we don't appreciate each other's similarities and struggles. And so I think exposure is so important. And so I immediately think about research that's done as it relates to like prostate cancer and breast cancer. And I have quite a few colleagues who are doing research in those areas who have collaborators from researchers in different countries in Africa, because they're trying to see if there's a link between these different cancers, these high health disparities in breast cancer and prostate cancer. Well, what do these, are these disparities in these other countries in Africa? And studies show that they are. So are the genes, so are there issues with the environment in both of these places, or issues with the genetics, or a combination of the two, which is probably the case, the environment and the genetics working hand in hand to lead to these health disparities. And then of course, mix all that up with, structural racism and all that other great stuff, it leads to these health disparities. So we see some of the same health disparities in the U.S. that you see in these other countries across this world. So I say all that to say that exposure is so important. So when we have these collaborations, these international collaborations, and they need to be mutual. When we say that, they need to be mutual. A lot of times, how can I exploit? Sometimes I feel like it's more of an exploiting piece than a really mutual piece. Okay, no, we're not going to various countries in Africa to exploit. We're going there to, you know, to help uplift them and help work with them and help us learn stuff that we don't know. You know, as again, it's a mutual respect, a mutual partnership. What can we learn from you and what can you learn from us? And so I think until those things happen, you know, we're still going to be in the same space of not being able to really use the power and influence we have to make a difference in STEM. And so again, exposure and true mutual partnership and collaborations. And again, not exploiting, you know, because initially when like for example, with the vaccines, initially there was stories out, oh, let's do some clinical trials in Africa, but you know, in some of the countries in Africa, but it wasn't coming off as mutual. It was coming off like, let's go and do stuff over there, kind of more of like exploitation. So again, I think we just got to be very careful to make sure that it's true collaboration, true partnerships with our international partners, you know, with the overall goal of making things better as it relates to STEM and the diversity workforce.
Appreciate those comments. And as we're winding down towards the end of thinking about how to move forward, and while we have great ideas, we can have partnerships of conversations, is that we also need to talk about resources such as funding and who are those key influencers. And Charlotte, you started to talk about funding. Could you just talk a little bit more about that as to where funding's place is in terms of moving the needle forward?
You know, with respect to, you know, I think people are approaching equity or health equity from many ways, and organizations, including ours, are actively involved in many different partnership opportunities. We also are active in donating funds, people, resources to try to close the gap in the space. And we know funding is important, but I want to bring to light another area that really needs our attention, and it's how you can get the funding. Is not just we need someone else to give us more, but it goes to what Sabrina and Antonio just were recently talking about, which is really the partnership model. So what do I mean by this? You know, individually, there's an opportunity to do so much, but when you actually bring together people with overlapping interests, what we call a mega community model, then people actually can accelerate their opportunity to get education, to get access, and to get resources. So when you really think about this, it allows you to partner with people across different sectors, across different industries, to really do some really creative, innovative stuff. But you have to even know that this is possible. Many people have not been outside of their institution, may not have been outside of their city, may not have been outside of their state. But what I do find doing the global work that we do is once people understand that that's a possibility, there's usually this overwhelming desire to learn about other cultures, to partner with other cultures, and to do that. That also provides a stronger opportunity for you to get on the radar of either public funding, private funding, or some sort of research grants, because the impact that you're able to demonstrate when you're working together cross-functionally is much bigger, is much more attractive, and can have more permanent impact in more places. So we partner with the things that we do as a corporation. We don't pretend to have all the answers to everything within our walls. So in addition to our philanthropic, our CSR efforts, we really do what we call capacity building that's defined the same way that, you know, the UN defines it. And so what we're striving to do when we do that work is to not only address the structural, the knowledge, the scientific, and sometimes the financial gaps that might exist. We're looking to really co-create with the community to create a sustainable way for that community to thrive in these ever-changing times. And when you bring all these brains together, where you start is definitely not where you end up, because the creative ideas that flow through those sorts of partnerships almost always far exceeds what you may have imagined. And I think that's what makes the opportunity for funding, for reach, for impact and unlocking the mysteries that we need in order to create health becomes so much easier to do. So yes, I think we have to focus on funding, but I think the way we focus on funding is uniquely important to do it through partnership, but to not only think about funding, but to think about the other things that you gain when you partner. Intellectual knowledge, access to another place, access to new ideas, and the ability to co-create an environment where more than one place can actually benefit from that work.
Yeah.
Perfect. So we're almost there. After Nehemiah, I'm going to close out. If you could just give some final comment and then I have a quick poll for you before we go into the Q&A. And anything that we're not able to finish up here, we can take up in the Q&A section.
Yeah, just to quickly add to what Dr. Owens was saying, I think there's also the need to maintain that perspective that she spoke about, and we're all speaking about, as leaders as well. It's not really popular or even flattering to talk about, but oftentimes there is the inappropriate feelings of, if they get ahead, maybe I'm going backwards, or this sort of like, I want to get more, or this sort of, sometimes there's a non-communal attitude, or I say temptation, that arises when partnerships happen that have the potential to do amazing things, right? When we start looking at the multi-million-dollar grant that's being awarded, all right, where is the pie? Who's going to get what, right? And oftentimes that hinders just the great output that some things can bring about when resources are there, right? Because we come together, we all believe early on, but when the lines and the paperwork begins to fall out, and I'm speaking from personal experience on this, actually, and there is a need to trust that who we work with, as we work with each other, that there is no intentions to put each other down or to make ourselves, posture ourselves as better than one or the other, because ultimately the why is bigger than any of us. Ultimately, this is something that will outlive us. And so I just want to speak to that too, because I know we don't always talk about it because it's not flattering, but there's a need to have a desire to want us all to win more than I just want myself to win as we do these things.
Perfect. So to close out, I'm going to ask one question from each of you. Do you think, in the spirit of the Jubilee, that the ancestors are smiling? Tony? Yes or no? Just yes or no?
Absolutely yes.
Nehemiah?
Yes, indeed.
Sabrina?
Yeah, I hope so.
And Charlotte?
Absolutely. I have a t-shirt that I like to wear sometimes that say, I am my ancestors' wildest dreams. And so I like to believe that, yes, we're making progress.
Well, thank you very much for this discussion, and really look forward to hearing your comments in the Q&A. It has been an honor, and until the next time. I believe now Debs will be coming on.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Wonderful. Thank you. Yes, I'm Deborah Daly. I am the Global Co-Chair for SNBEN. Thank you so much for the conversation. It was insightful and inspiring. And we have a number of questions come in. So I will start reading these out. The first one is actually, there's a couple of questions that are similar, so I'll read them both out. So I was going to ask, what initiative, if any, have you all been involved with to dismantle systemic racism in the process of students moving into STEM programs? And the other one that was related to this is, in what ways should scientific institutions tackle systemic racism, from microaggressions to lack of opportunities? It's a meaty one. They're all meaty questions.
Definitely meaty. I'll start by saying, shamelessly, I would say my organization, STEM Media, That is something that we are actively doing, both internally and externally. So to create a community, create content, and to bring about opportunities that sometimes on paper, all right, are efforts to dismantle systemic racism, but lack the actual push and effort and the dissemination to actually make sure it actually has legs. Case in point, hey, we have to make sure that, you know, the underrepresented community is aware of these positions before we let it out. Well, we just post it, not really any effort, word of mouth, or make sure anything's happening. And then when the time is elapsed, hey, we did what we were supposed to do, the box is checked, and now we can go and get the person that we make it so easy to get anyway, right? So we want to pull in and actually close that gap. In addition to that, we seek to work with and provide a voice and connect individuals who have intelligence, expertise, backgrounds in certain areas to speak with those who are at institutions who may say, hey, my faculty and staff only has like 2 people and they're tired of me calling them all the time, right? Well, you have a whole network you can plug into right now, and you can speak to someone that may not be in your geographic region, but have the same type of capability to speak to that. And then there's the content, right? The ability to just put out. And I think it's important not only that we see ourselves doing things like this, but that they see us doing things like this. It's important for us to be teaching a class, not only of just Black students, but myself teaching a class of predominantly white students, so that they can know that this is normal. This is what it's supposed to be, right? There isn't anything erroneous about this. So those are just a few things I'll speak on that we are doing at STEM Media.
Would anyone like to, Antonia, great.
Yeah. So great question. I love your answers, Nehemiah. So I would say for me, I would sum it up by saying that I try to be at the table. I try to be at the table because as you all know, there's a lot of decisions that are made about students, about who get accepted to schools and programs, who don't, who are good students, who are bad students. There's a lot said at the table behind the scenes, and if you're not at the table behind the scenes, it's hard to help break down some of the structural racism, because some of it's just you being at the table saying, whoa, no, that's not, no, that's not right, or well, we might need to see this another way. And so I try to be at the table. So so there's a couple of things I've done, and again, this is not about me. This is about what Nehemiah says, about the big why. It's about the big why. And so I've been able to be involved in helping to set up internship programs at schools like UNC and Duke for our central students. I've been involved in making decisions to make sure that when grants go in, you're not asking us at the last minute for a letter of support. that really bothers me. You're not waiting to the last minute to ask for a letter of support. We were like, no, I need to be a co-PI or something, because we need to make sure that this is a true mutual partnership and not just you just doing a quick drive-by letter of support, and move on. And so I would say for me, trying to make sure I'm at the table. Scientific organizations, I'm at the table. Again, it's not about me. This is about the big why. I'm at the table. I'm on the leadership committee. I'm on the leadership teams. So decisions are made that involve not just big research institutions, but all institutions, big and small. And so I would say for me, what I've been trying to do is be at the table and be present. Be present. It's sometimes about being present. You don't have to speak all the time. Just being at the table. So when people make these decisions, they're thinking about you and what you represent.
Charlotte, did you want to add? Sorry, you're on mute.
Okay, there it goes. So I also think one of the things that we've been doing, again, is to really amplify the resources that we have, is to really partner with NGOs, with academicians, with communities, to really help address their capacities to address the health inequities, which do get to some of the things that you just asked about. And so we really co-create with communities, which ways can we actually address health inequities? And people go, well, what does health have to do with all these other things? It has everything to do with it, because the social determinants of health include things like having economic stability, having education access and quality, having healthcare access and quality, having a neighborhood and a built environment that's conducive and health promoting.
and having a social and community context that's health promoting. And so we really make sure that everything we do through the Center for Health Equity and Patient Affairs identifies with communities and addresses these social determinants of health in partnerships with other people who may have expertise beyond or that are different from what we do. In that way, what we are really trying to do is make sure that the communities are stronger after we have had this partnership to then have grassroots community level efforts to address these in a way that's sustainable. So in other words, we like to work ourselves out of that partnership and move into a different realm, because when we're able to provide those resources, the ability to create new instincts, abilities, processes, so that communities can survive, adapt, and thrive, then that's how you actually deconstruct these issues. You can actually deconstruct these issues when you address what happens from the time we're born through the time that we age throughout our communities. Because it's not only about education, it ultimately dictates health. And if we don't disrupt the cycle, then it actually perpetuates itself for generations to come.
Great, and this actually ties into one of the other questions on the list is how can organizations connect with countries and I guess communities who are Black majority but STEM minority?
I mean, I feel like we've partially answered that question previously by, you need to first identify those countries in which you're interested. And I think if we're talking about science, it's just going by what is your field of expertise? What is it that you're trying to, expand or explore or understand better? And how can you connect, within those countries? There are universities, there are, research institutions as well, and reach out to these people and just connect. The same way you would connect with someone on LinkedIn is the same way you have to do the work and find the mutual interest and then find the people. I'd say it's as easy as that, and then see where it leads you, and from there create partnerships and work together. But it stems from just going out there and doing the work and trying to find the people you want to collaborate with.
Right. So there's a question for Tony, though I think everyone can jump in on this one. And you had mentioned internships, but it says here, Tony mentioned he was good at math and science and was therefore nurtured. What can be done to encourage support students who may have the ability but haven't been noticed?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yes, please, colleagues, please feel free to join in. Yeah, it's scary to think about, but when you're not noticed and nurtured, it makes that path really hard. It makes that path really hard. And I think that happens a lot. I think that happens a lot to our kids. You listen to look at some of these studies, how around elementary school, at certain grade levels, black girls are they're good in math until they get to a certain grade level, and then all of a sudden they don't get that support anymore, and then things change. So that's a really great question, and I would say that again, it takes a village to really make this happen. It takes a village. So so hopefully there's parent support, hopefully there's parents and grandparents and brother and sister support. Hopefully there's church family support. If you go to church or some religious community, there's support there. Hopefully there's support from somewhere in that school or classroom. But it's tough. It's tough. I mean, I think for all of us, we are where we are because we were noticed by somebody. On some level, we were noticed by somebody, and someone took an interest in us. And so when that doesn't happen, so if I'm just thinking about myself, if I didn't have that biology teacher. If I didn't have that biology teacher in high school to hey, this is a great opportunity, I don't know. I hope there would be other opportunities to help me to get on the path I'm on, but I don't know I would have had the opportunity to do that internship as a high school student under a plant pathologist if it wasn't for the biology teacher telling his wife about me and I got this great student in my class. So I would say that I think it's important to do all we can to if you don't get that support from one person, try to find it from somewhere else, but that support is needed. That support and nurturing is needed at some level. A boys and girls club or a YMCA, somewhere there needs to be some support that's given to let that student know that they can do it. Because that's what's needed for all of us. That's what's needed for all of us. But I'd love to hear what my other colleagues have to say about that.
I would say I share a similar story to you, Tony, where, you know, you are very passionate about something, and then there's that one professor or several sometimes that notice that you are really passionate, and it just like gives you that book, or it gives you that contact, or tells you, oh, you need to apply to this program that you never heard of, you don't even know how to do, you know, the application process, and that person holds your hand and really just like push you through. But I think we need to look at it as, we need to take what's great into the approach that they had, and that was, you know, just targeting one person that was deemed exceptional or that was standing out, and just make it more, you know, accessible to everyone. So to me, it's making sure that there are programs where you try to replicate the same thing. It's just like, instead of focusing on just the most brilliant or whatever person in the room, you just address all of those who are interested in a particular, you know, topic, whether they are the greatest at the moment or not, and make sure that you can just, you know, hold their hands. And yeah, it takes a village, but I think sometimes teachers, especially when you're young, they can be so focused about finding that rare, you know, it's just like, oh, that's my golden ticket. It's just like the pride of finding that one student that is so great, and they just want to give all of their effort and pour so much into that student. But again, it's just not about individuals. If we want to change things, it's about, you know, thinking about the collective, like the group. And so we need to have an approach that is different. It's just like, yeah, I would like to focus on that one student, but it might not be the only one who is interested in math. And the fact that I would just focus on him may not allow the other to bloom and to just also see themselves as capable of doing the thing. So we need to think about what I would do for that particular student. Maybe I should do it on a broader scale. And then, you know, I'll find the group and nurture those who are maybe at different level to start off with, but just making sure that I can, you know, go with them somewhere. So I think this is something we see a lot in education, that willingness to pour so much into that one individual. But sometimes you have to think, we need to change that and think about the group more than, you know, that one person. And also, like Tony said, it has to come also from, you know, everywhere you can find community. Community is so important, and community sometimes is family, community is sometimes people in school, community is anyone. And I think it's just, we need to have communities that encourages us from a young age to explore our potential, and have school, because we cannot do this without school. Schools are mostly the responsible one. Put the money and put in the work to make sure that they can nurture those who are not necessarily the most brilliant, but who are willing to learn. Kids always want to learn. You have to give the opportunity to all of them, not just the most brilliant ones, so that you can, you know, eventually change the dynamics and change the numbers.
Wonderful, thank you. Another question is, allies support the marginalized when there is little risk. Accomplices use their privilege to challenge the norms and help affect change. How can we encourage allies to become accomplices? Another meaty one.
First of all, I agree. Whoever said that with the first part. The question I would say is sometimes about someone letting go of their convenience. And that doesn't, and like convenience and power and things like that, it doesn't let go easily. And so there's always the threat of, hey, if I speak up, then I might be labeled as one of them. And I kind of like the way things feel right now. And so there's a conversation about courage to become uncomfortable for the sake of something you believe in even more. And so to anybody, even right now, who is like ally-ish, right? Maybe watching this, right? You have to be able to be okay with being uncomfortable because it is the right thing to do. And it really comes down to that. I mean, there are people who perhaps need to know that hey, there's an economic opportunity of being more diverse that we're missing out on. I mean, numerical, there's actual millions of dollars, trillions of dollars, I think one study's even said over the decades that we have suffered from inequities and so forth, right? So there's the argument, right, you can make there as well. But I know that a lot of times people are just moved by their feelings, period. And I'm gonna be quiet because it feels better to be quiet than to speak up in this moment. You may regret it later on, but in that moment, I just couldn't overcome the fear of being labeled. And so that's what I want to just ultimately put out there and say, hey, what's more important to you? What's more important to you? And if your statement says that, you know, equity is important to you, then your feeling may have to take a back seat when it comes to the risk of losing your convenience and privilege in certain moments.
Wonderful, thanks. Sabrina.
Also, I want to say, when it comes to speaking about ally and people helping, sometimes in the light of what happened, and we saw it, people were so keen, there was a frenzy, so keen to help, donations everywhere, everyone wants to get involved, and all of a sudden this quiet down. I sometimes think that the best way to go about it is to do things thinking that, you know, allies are backup. So you make your plan as, as thorough as possible, because the problem with that is that when you're not an affected person, it's easy to tune in or tune out. And that's when it becomes complicated, because you want to get people in, but they can just choose that I'm not feeling it right now. You know, that what you're saying, I get it, but that's not really affecting me. So sometimes it's hard, and we might feel rejected, and we might feel like we have to pull them more. But I think sometimes it's just people will pour into you if you believe in yourself, and if you have a project that, you know, is standing on its own. So sometimes you have to believe so much in your project that people have no choice but, you know, add in without thinking of doing things and hoping that people will jump in. Sometimes I feel like we have this expectation of, you know, they want to help, and you've seen it from the beginning of the pandemic to now. How many people really reach out now with the same whim that they had at the beginning? They tune out because it's not affecting them on a daily basis. So I think sometimes we also have to pay attention and make sure that we are solid on our own, so solid that, yeah, it becomes like, you know, no-brainer. It's like, yeah, I want to be part of this, but not necessarily make plans, always hoping that people will come in because they can tune in and out, because that doesn't really affect them that much or on a regular basis. So I think, you know, I appreciate the help, it's great, but sometimes we also have to be able to detach ourselves from the expectation that people will always be there to help. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
Great, that's actually a great segue into our final question, which is, how can our listeners and their networks get involved in any of your projects? Send money.
Say that.
So I won't disagree with the money part that was just mentioned. So I would say that you know, there are many ways to get connected. There's many ways to get connected. You know, I'm a professor at a historically Black college and university, so there's always opportunities to support the HBCUs. They're usually not as supported as well as they should be compared to other institutions. So finances is always a needed commodity. But not just finances. You know, also your time and talents. Internship programs, opportunities for students to shadow. Again, students are trying to figure out what they want to do, you know, at this level as undergraduates, and not all students have the opportunity to be exposed to MDs or PhDs or dentists or pharmacists, you know, growing up. I wasn't. I mean, like I say, you know, thankfully because of allyship, I was able to be exposed to a scientist, college professor that basically led me down my path. So I would say, you know, in terms of the academic level, in terms of, you know, there's always funding needs, but also opportunities for internships, and other opportunities to expose our students to all the many STEM professions that are out here. So that's one of the things I would say.
Nehemiah, how can people get involved in your projects?
STEMmedia.com/connect. That's going to be forever kind of the way we kind of point to certain things. It ranges from following us on social media, subscribing to our YouTube channel, to joining our Slack community, to actually donating. Again, I'm not going to disagree with the money either. Donating and contributing to actually providing paid projects where we could serve, not just handing out or anything like that. We can actually serve, provide video production, content, community, augment what you're doing. So STEMmedia.com/connect. I'll put it in the chat for those who want to see it. But in addition to that, I think also like introductions are really good, right? And when you hear people's missions and you know people in your network that are also working in the direction, making that email introduction is great. That LinkedIn introduction is great. And who knows where that will lead. So I'll leave it there, STEMmedia.com/connect. And if you have any introductions, whether it's you or someone you know, I welcome the email intro.
Right. Sabrina?
Yeah, well, same, bbstem.co.uk. You go onto our website, and then there's many ways you can connect with us. There's always the donation. We always welcome those, and that they allow us to do programs like this summer. We are going to sponsor a school program, allowing, like young people from a, let's say, more disadvantaged background to have access to STEM, courses and classes, or also being able to have receive meals. As you know, the cost of living is increasing in the UK, and just like those donations allow us to, support projects that are very close to our heart. But then, just be part of our professional network. Make sure that you can also say that you want to be a mentor, because mentorship is so important. And keep up with what we're doing, and see, if there's any project that you feel very passionate about, that you're involved in, you can see where there might be synergies. Just, there's a button for that, and reach out to us so that we can work together. But yeah, just go on the website, and from there you can find many ways of connecting with us, or reach out to me on LinkedIn as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And Charlotte?
The one thing I would say is we're really striving to not only continue to do the work that we're doing, but to encourage everyone to do what they can from where they sit. And so I would just ask people to, for inspiration, you can look at the work that we've done on our Takeda.com website. But what's most important is, even if you can't be involved in any of the projects that we're doing, we just want everyone to be a champion for health equity. And so find small ways in your community to do something positive for someone, whether it's tutoring so that they can help, you can help people get through a certain class, whether it's through finding a way to help improve economic stability in your own community, whether or not it's helping to educate people about health and where to go for health, or telling people what resources you're aware of in your community. Because one of the things that we keep hearing about is lack of awareness, lack of knowledge about what's available. So, if you're on social media, if you are in your community, if you go to church, barbershops, any place where people will listen to you, be a champion for change. If you can do things in your community to create a sounder community, if you are in an area that doesn't have access to groceries, can you help create a food garden? Can you help create a way for people to know what other resources exist in the community? So my biggest ask for everyone is to figure out how to be a part of your own personal growth, but also the growth and wellness of your community.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. Brilliant conversation and brilliant answers to some very meaty questions. I'm going to hand over now to Bernadette Bino. Thank you.
Noticing a lack of diverse representation in classical music and a lack of well-produced string covers, cellist Eric Cooper came up with the idea of Sterling Strings. Founded in 2016, Sterling Strings has pushed the boundaries of what a string quartet can do. Composed of Black classically trained string players, Sterling Strings has performed various venues throughout New York City, including Joe's Pub, Jazz at Lincoln Center, Madison Square Garden, Rockwood Music Hall, and Alley Cat Amateur Theater at Beekman Hotel. In addition, they have played numerous educational concerts around New York City in order to inspire the next generation of string players. The group is also highly sought after for private events due to their vast and eclectic repertoire and fiery interpretations. For more information, you can find them at www.sterlingstringsnyc.com. Welcome, Sterling Strings.
Thank you, Sterling Strings, for an excellent performance. There are so many others to thank, so apologies if I miss anyone. As the old adage goes, please blame my brain, not my heart. First, thank you to each of our guest panelists for an excellent and thought-provoking conversation. Next, to Rachel Jacobs and Laura Bennett, thank you for your continued guidance and efforts in helping SN Ben with each of our endeavors and initiatives. To the team at Scientific American, thank you, Laura, Jeff, Sunya, thank you so much. It's your continued partnership with SN Ben that has allowed us to present such exciting events year after year. We look forward to continuing and expanding that relationship in the years to come. Finally, to the SN Ben Global Committee, my family. We've done it again. Debs, Bernadette, Marlene, Flick, Devin, and of course, our big sister Mimi. Thank you for all of your efforts in bringing SN Ben's vision to fruition this year. Remember, we can only celebrate today's accomplishment for a short time, as there is still work to be done. Paid and promoted, right? Thank you all for joining us. Take care.